Hey listeners, your host Denny Corby here. If you're new to the channel, I just want to let you know that this particular episode is from the vault with our OG host Gabe, and this is just good old-fashioned Private Club Radio. Enjoy.
Welcome to the inaugural edition of Private Club Radio. I'm delighted to have you join me here. It's going to be an amazing journey that we take together. Each week, I'll be bringing you guests from the world of private clubs from every corner of the industry. So whether you are a general manager, a membership director, a catering professional, right down to the servers and the bag boys, whatever your role at the club, you're going to have some incredible education on this show. And you're going to learn a lot from some of the experts that I have to bring you. I have some really exciting folks coming on this show. Today is our inaugural episode, January 25th. We're speaking to Mr. Rick Coyne. Rick is the CEO of the Professional Club Marketing Association. That's the association for membership directors and marketing directors at private club. It's going to be a really exciting interview. Rick is going to talk to us about the history of the PCMA, sort of what's happened in the club industry in the last 20 years, and his bold predictions for the future of the private club industry. In episode 2 later today, we have Dick Coplin. He's partner of Coplin and Keebler, an executive search firm for the private club industry. We've got Dan Schmitz in episode 3, owner of KE Camps. We have Lynn LaFon DeLuca, executive director of the Association of Club Catering Professionals, to tell us what's happening on the catering side of things. She's coming on February 1st. Then we're going across the pond to speak to our friend Alistair Dunsmuir. He's the editor of Golf Club Management magazine in the UK, and he's going to give us the perspective of what's happening in Europe. On February 15th, we'll have Rick Coffey, M3 manager at Club Essential. On February 22nd, Susan Green, who is your 2016 president of the Professional Club Marketing Association. We have Henry Wallmeyer on February 29th. He's the CEO and president of the National Club Association. Those are the guys going to bat for this industry, lobbying for this industry in Washington, D.C. On March 7th, we have Kevin Caldabaugh, president of the Club Spa and Fitness Association. So as you can see, it's a really exciting and a really diverse lineup that's going to be on this show. My hope is that for you, the listener, this show becomes your go-to source for education, for announcements, to stay up to date on the latest trends and happenings in the world of private clubs. Thank you again for joining me. I'd appreciate it if you enjoy this show to please share it with your friends and with your colleagues. This is a resource that I really want to make widely available to everyone working in the private club industry. So without further ado, I want to bring on our first guest on this first episode of Private Club Radio, Rick Coyne. Rick is the CEO of the Professional Club Marketing Association. The PCMA is an allied association of the Club Managers Association of America, the Canadian Society of Club Managers, and the Association of Private Club Directors. Rick has been engaged in the private club industry for over 40 years in areas of club management and operations, strategic planning, market analysis, and developing successful marketing programs for private clubs. He's worked with over 900 private clubs and has been a guest speaker in over 600 workshops and seminars, both nationally and internationally. Rick, welcome to Private Club Radio.
Thanks, Gabe. Great to be here.
Rick, I'd love to have you kind of start off, give us a history of the PCMA from its beginnings. I'd love for you to tell us, why did you start the organization and what is the mission of the PCMA?
Well, it's we started thinking about developing the association approximately 25 years ago. We started doing some workshops for young professionals that were engaged in developing marketing strategies for clubs, and just a little over 20 years ago, this is our 20th anniversary, we got together with John Fornero, who is now the publisher of Boardroom Magazine, Donna Coyne, and myself, and we officially launched Professional Club Marketing Association. In our early days in the formation of the association, we really had several thoughts in mind. One was there were other organizations like CMAA, the PGA, and for almost every discipline within the private club industry, with the exception of the membership professional. And we felt that because of all of the changes that were taking place in the industry, that this was a group that really did need some representation. And of course, along with that representation, we felt that there was going to be a great need for education in the field. And finally, like all other associations representing their professionals, we felt that there should be an accreditation program. And so that was the original mission. And I think we've stuck to that since that time.
That's awesome. So, what are some of your goals for the organization in the short term and in the long term?
Well, every year our mission and goal is to research to determine where exactly the industry is heading relative to the needs and wants of not only our existing members everywhere in the country and in some places of the world, but also looking at that next generation of member and what it is that they are going to be looking for in the private club. So our goals in the short term here this coming year, obviously, you probably know this, Gabe, but we've been hosting a national conference for the past 20 years. The 21st will be in Kansas City in September of 2016. So even though that's almost a year away, we're just hard at work trying to get that all organized and structured. We'll also be doing 5 regional workshops this year. We have 23 chapters throughout the country today, and we have been doing a Florida symposium every year. We'll continue to do that this year, but we're looking at 4 other regions around the country to take out kind of a summary of last year's national conference into kind of allow a preview of what we're going to be doing in 2016. Of course, our goal is always towards growing the organization, growing the participation in our annual conference. And I think one of our underlying goals and objectives is kind of getting the rest of the associations and organizations thinking in terms of their contribution to how a solid, healthy club is dependent upon membership growth.
Yeah, we're going to get into some of your 360-degree approach here in a minute. I was happy to be at the Nashville conference this last year in 2015. That was great. And the year before in Las Vegas. So you put on a great show. I'd definitely tell the listeners to check out the PCMA National Conference. If they can make it, it'd be a great place to see it.
Yeah, it's not just the education, it's the networking. And we jokingly call ourselves the Association of Fun, but we really do try to make sure that, life is really about enjoying yourself. And so in our educational programs, we always manage to find ways to really do some fine networking and having fun.
Yeah, it's a great time. So a lot has changed in the industry since you started the PCMA. What are some of the big changes you've seen take place? And since the inception of the PCMA all the way up until today?
Well, the inception was really predicated on some very interesting changes that were taking place, Gabe. And, it's we looked at 2008 and, there was kind of a mobilization in 2008 because the economic collapse kind of forced everybody to say, whoa, we are vulnerable. So I think that would be the key issue. But one of the things going backwards from there is to say that there were a ton of cracks in the foundation of the private club industry. And I think what happened in 2008 was we had a confluence of those cracks, and it paused everybody for just long enough to say, hey, maybe we should start paying attention. And it didn't happen, 2008 was an alarm clock, but the cracks began to develop almost like sand through an hourglass. It just kind of happened. It wasn't something that was so catastrophic that it stopped everybody in their tracks and said, let's pay attention. Some of those things are an aging population. So some of the big issues are the reculturalization of America. And part of that is the relationship of family today. Many of the sociologists today will say that today's child rearing parents are the most child-centric ever. And, whether the reason is because they're dual wage earner households, that becomes a very important embedded piece for us in the private club industry to recognize family, gender. so many clubs still harbor that good old boy kind of mentality. And yet when we do the research and find that 85% of discretionary purchases are being made by the female, and women over 50 control 3/4 of the nation's wealth. Then you take a look at time, and time has become the new commodity. These are all the things that are retooling, reshaping the way clubs need to reinvent themselves in order to stay relevant to not only their existing generation of members, but the next generation of members as well.
Absolutely. And to that point, I know you do a lot of research with the PCMA. That was one of the goals when you started the organization, is to actually come up with some research and industry data that didn't exist. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think fundamentally, the club business, while it is a recreational enclave for our members, is a very complicated business. And one of the things that we find out there lacking sometimes is real market research when a club is trying to set its initiation fees or set its dues or categories of membership. Very seldom has it historically um, been on the basis of a market analysis. And, what we've learned over the years is that a freestanding club typically has a 85% or more of its market within a 15-minute drive time of that club. And so the market, that 15-minute drive time, is really the people who are going to be capable of being attracted to that club. And so you're setting price, you're setting the programs, events, activities, everything can be kind of predictable once you understand that marketplace. And of course, one of the other things that's happened, going back to your last question, but tying it to this one, Gabe, is that competition has become extraordinary. The National Golf Foundation in 1988 at a golf symposium said that there needed to be a golf course a day built between then and the year 2000 simply to keep up with demand. And by and large, there's 30 some odd hundred clubs, the majority of which were daily fee, were placed into the marketplace since that time. And of course, that has changed the dynamic of competition dramatically. And while we don't see a continuation of that high growth of new clubs, we are seeing now an outmigration, closings at the rate of approximately 180 a year. And my last intelligence on that was that the National Golf Foundation predicted that 180 per year for the foreseeable future. So that's kind of a thumbnail sketch, but what it says is that clubs have to be increasingly observant of their marketplace today in order to be sustainable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, to that point, how should clubs be positioning themselves given these current factors in the marketplace?
Great question. The clubs have traditionally seen themselves as their closed environment. That's their community. That's their club community, their club family, if you will. And when you look at the marketplace today and the ever increasing need to replace lost members, at least in pace with attrition, it becomes abundantly clear that the club is not just serving one community. It's not just serving that existing member community. Because let's face it, some clubs are made up of an older, more mature generation, and if that is who they're really programming and all of their events is driven around that, the next generation of member, unless it happens to be a retirement community, is probably not going to be interested in what that club has to offer. So what we're seeing today is a club serving two communities. One is obviously, again, it's existing members, but then it's setting up the relevance, the brand that is attractive to that next generation of member. Typically, most of the studies out there suggest to us that next generation of market in the traditional club is going to be a household with the primary income earner under 55 with children living at home. And so that demographic is seeing things a little bit differently maybe than their more mature members. So what we're seeing clubs today having to program themselves into a much more relevant position. Relevancy is changing with each generation. I thought I'd morph into my father. I never did. I thought my daughters would morph into me. They never will. And as a consequence, the greatest challenge that clubs have today is remaining relevant to each of these generations, to the gender, to the family, and all of the cross sections in between.
So how does your 360 approach, your Club 360 approach, how does that speak to those needs?
Well, one of the other conditions that we have seen since approximately 2003 is a remarkable drop in the number of golf participants. Interestingly, as we did our research in a white paper that we did called Armageddon or Renewal, we found that this was a third life cycle for golf in the last 100 years. And it began in the early 1900s, or approximately 4,000 Gatsby-esque kinds of clubs being developed all over the country, very, very high-end enclaves for the very, very wealthy. And as World War II came along, many of those closed as the world was turned upside down, and some of them actually, including several that you'd know, became German prisoner of war camps during World War II. And after World War II became the second growth cycle, and that was daily fee. We saw Eisenhower on newsreels playing golf. It was the advent of the Nicklaus and Palmer and era, and we saw them on newsreels. And so an abundance of daily fees. It was a public access period. And then in the late 70s, early 80s, we saw the advent of the high-end daily fee and the development course. Each one of them is going through a high growth, slow growth, maturity, in decline stage. Where we are right now is in the decline stage of the third life cycle. And as a consequence, with golf declining, we were forced as an organization and an association to take a look at what is actually occurring in clubs. What's the relevant appeal in a private club? And if you looked at all of the things that a club have, whether it's a swimming pool, dining rooms, fitness center, the aesthetics of a beautiful campus, and golf, you'd look at those things and say, all right, how much time, energy, and money, call it bandwidth, are we putting into each one of these areas? And almost 99.9% of the time, you find that the area of golf has absorbed most of that time, energy, and money over the years, and in many cases continues to do that.
Right.
We felt like maybe that was not the exact right direction, that if the female is making the decisions, and maybe she is, or maybe she isn't a golfer, and families are important, and time is a new commodity, that we needed to start looking at some of these other areas in the club, like dining and fitness and all in the aquatic areas. And as a consequence, we said the world of clubs is a 360-degree environment, and we need to start putting more of our emphasis in these other areas effectively to program, not necessarily to go out and spend a lot of money in capital, but certainly in the programming efforts. And when we introduced that approximately 3 years ago, it was very, very well received. Unfortunately, as our attendees were leaving, they said the problem with it is going to be to take it back to my club and get my GM and get my department heads, and even to some degree get my board to believe in this concept, because golf has been king. And of course, that message turned out to be true. And in subsequent years, what we've done is to create white papers for essentially each department, talking about how they can increase that relevance. And when they do, what happens? And the success stories are essentially out there. Those clubs that have embraced this 360 and said, we're more than just a golf club. We really have a lot to offer here, and expanded their image and brand. They're doing extraordinarily well. We've seen some examples of clubs that have been on the rough side of of the equation to gone now to waiting lists because they've broadened essentially their market appeal in that process.
That's incredible. So, how do you get the buy-in from the general managers and from the other club department heads?
Well, that's the challenge, and I think you asked about goals and objectives earlier. That one of our objectives is to work closely with CMAA and with PGA and others that influence their own association members and bring to them the importance of doing all of the due diligence, bringing to them the importance that each person within that club has in sending a brand message, and the importance of reshaping that brand message to a broader section of the marketplace. As we look at it today, roughly 12 to 17% of people that can afford private clubs are golfers. That means 83% potentially of the market out there is not interested in what we have unless we make it a place that people who are non-golfers want to be. And that's a huge section of the market for us to go after. One of the things that we also looked at in Club 360 was that if there is a continued decline in golf, there has to be a plan. But even though the PGA has come out with Golf 2.0 and worked very hard at trying to get new golfers into the game, it hasn't really come to fruition. And if we're not getting them on the national level, maybe there's a way in which if we develop and grow our membership from non-golfers and then convert them into golfers, that there is a real future in driving that new golf growth from within our existing clubs.
I think that's a great approach, and I think it's very underutilized at times. There's so many more. I see that there's a lot of memberships categories being created, like, your social members, your athletic and fitness members. And that just seems like an untapped market where we can actually reach out to those folks and, offer them something, right? Like, a day with a head pro or something like that, and actually start to turn them into golfers themselves.
Yeah, you're so right, Gabe. Traditionally, the secondary memberships have almost been looked at with disdain, that someone paying half the dues could take up the space in the dining room or the fitness center or wherever else. But the fact of the matter is that if you can get them in there, let's face it, the time that we have to spend today is different than what it was 10 and 15 years ago. And so I may not have the time today to play golf, but I will have at some point in time. And I think what's very interesting to us here is that I see that secondary membership very much as a holding tank. And if we get our pros out onto the practice tee and we bring these people who are non-golfers or bring these people in or just occasional golfers and get them more involved, get their handicaps down, get the families engaged, engage the woman. I think if we can get them engaged in golf, we can grow and get this golfing public healthy again.
Yeah, about 4 years ago, I hired a business consultant. And the advice he gave me is the easiest person to sell to is the person that just bought from you. So I feel like that's, perfect lead into this, that, hey, they're already at your club. They're already enjoying themselves. You can actually bump them up to the next level of membership. Why? It's a lot easier to put your energy into that, someone who's already there, than to go out looking for new members.
That's absolutely right, Gabe.
Looking into your crystal ball, Rick, what's your bold prediction for the future of the private club industry?
Well, that's a very heady question. I don't think any of us really knows where it's headed. I think one of the things that we are seeing is a lot more of the management companies getting in and taking control. The buying power that they bring to the table is often a good interim way to augment incomes. I do think that what we will see in the future is a reduction in the mindset that we must remain strictly and totally towards the game of golf. I think we're going to see clubs expand. I can tell you that there are clubs all over Northern California here that have embraced something as simple as bocce ball. Many of them boast 400 plus league members. I mean, that's more than you'll find in most MGAs or WGAs in any club in the United States. And then you look at things like pickleball and you see things like that are, I played tennis as a young man. My knees wouldn't allow it today, but I can get out and play pickleball. And so we're seeing the advent of all these other activities within clubs within the clubs, the affinity kinds of programs that get people out. I was talking with John McCabe just yesterday. He was at the Union League Club, and I was always marveled by the Union League Club because every time I went there, which was fairly often, there would be a luminary author or a politician or a lecturer that, was world renowned. And I asked John how many programs that the club actually did in a year's time. And he said, well over 1,200, and most of them were not actually sponsored by the club. They were sponsored by clubs within the club. So I think what you're going to see is the more socialization of the club. Lifestyle relevance today is really what it's all about. I have precious leisure time. When I find time to take advantage of that leisure, I want to be able to do something that's going to be meaningful to my entire family. So I think we're going to see continued expansion in those areas. Those clubs that you look around and see that are doing extraordinarily well have typically done one of three things. They've expanded the spa fitness facilities. They have done something to their pool areas that make them much more family oriented. And I mean, the slides and all those sorts of things, but also an adult area. I could name several clubs around the country, Carmel being one of them, that has done an extraordinary job with that. And then multi-level dining. And again, Carmel comes to mind. They hired a chic restaurant design group to come in and completely redo their dining room. Far differently than what you'd find in the traditional club dining room setting. As a result, they're seeing increased usage. In most of the surveys that we do as well, we do see a trend towards more lifestyle orientation when we ask people the reason that they've joined or the reason they stay. In most occasions, what we're finding is it is the lifestyle events and activities that are more important to them than anything. And that usually is the dining, social activities, spa, fitness, even pool.
I might head to my club right now and play a little bocce ball. They built some bocce courts here at Carrollwood Country Club.
Well, isn't it amazing? And I hate to say it, but one of the things that I've noticed in everyone that I've visited, there is a little wine drinking that goes along with it. So I think this whole social element of being able to be with friends, have a glass of wine, and kind of hang out is really where the clubs are beginning to vacillate towards.
Yeah, I remember John from the Boardroom magazine, who you mentioned earlier. He gave a talk in Las Vegas back in 2014, and he was saying that the club is sort of the piazza, the classic piazza of Italy, where the neighborhood would come together and sort of just socialize. And that's really what a private club here is. I just love the way he explained that.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, more and more the club family is expanding. And it's interesting because we've done a few very large programs within clubs where we'll just do a 2-hour cocktail reception for members once a month. And the object, of course, is to get them to bring potential members out. But what has happened in doing these things is it's getting people out that maybe haven't seen each other. And so not only are you seeing membership growth from that kind of thing, but you're seeing the retention of the existing members get better. but you're seeing more activities because the more they see one another, the more they want to be with one another. So it's really an interesting phenomenon. It's exactly what it is. It's a family piazza.
Right. So you've had the pretty cool opportunity to visit some of the most exclusive clubs around the world. So do you have any others that stick out, and why?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're interestingly, in the 45 years this year that I've been in the industry, I've had the opportunity now to work with over 900 clubs, and I've been in probably 3,000, 3,200 clubs, and being as there's only a little over 5,000, that's quite a few of them.
Yeah, right.
And it's, from my perspective, it's not so much how large and ornate they may be. It's the kind of the way I'm made to feel when I go to these clubs. And so I look at the campus. I look at, a lot about the family that is that group of employees. Those are the ones that stand out. Mike Levis was at Congressional for many years, and I did a story for Boardroom as they went into the COO concept. And I had not been to Congressional prior to that, but so totally enjoyed the experience because it was a club community of workers. I mean, those folks that worked at Congressional really were a family. And because they felt family, they were giving off the experience to everybody that was there. So Congressional would stand up there. I just came back from a club called Saucon Valley in Pennsylvania that was part of the steel era days, the Bethlehem Steel Company. And the campus is amazing. The people are amazing. And there are tons of marvelous properties out there. Desert Mountain is one, but because of, for different reasons, 6 Nicholas courses, 6 clubhouses, and a beautiful campus, a progressive way of thinking. They've added walking trails and now stables and things that were traditionally not viewed as being necessary in the private club. I like the clubs that are out there thinking progressively and taking advantage of all of the assets and opportunities that they have.
Outside the box thinking. I think that's what it's all about.
Absolutely, Gabe.
All right, so we're going to wrap things up. Thank you so much for being on today with me, Rick. It was a real pleasure having you on the show today.
It's my pleasure, Gabe, anytime. And I hope those that are listening have gotten some value out of this conversation.
I'm sure they absolutely have. And if you'd like to get in contact with Rick, you can email him at rick@askpcma.org. Rick, thank you so much for joining me today on Private Club Radio.
Thank you, Gabe.
I'd also invite you guys to check out askpcma.org. That is the official website of the PCMA, the Professional Club Marketing Association, and it's a wonderful resource if you're a membership director or a membership marketing professional. That is a wonderful organization to be a part of. So that's going to do it for this first episode of Private Club Radio. But don't worry, we've got a lot more coming for you. I look forward to speaking to you in episode 2 and beyond. Until then, here's to your membership's success.
Just because this round is over doesn't mean you can't enjoy the 19th hole.
If you're enjoying the content here on Private Club Radio, we would love and appreciate any support you can give by sharing, subscribing, rating. Nothing is too big or small, and we truly appreciate the support. Until next time, catch you on the flippity flip.